In this episode, it was a real privilege to spend time with Emma Carpenter, the Senior Vice President for Recurring Revenue Acceleration at Cisco. She has an illustrious record of achievement working for major vendors such as Nortel, Avaya, Palo Alto Networks and Cisco twice. Originally from the United Kingdom, Emma has lived and worked in the US for over 12 years. Mostly in roles with global responsibility. I've known Emma for many years but lost touch until Mario Damasio, who you may remember from episode 11, recommended her as a podcast guest. I knew that this episode would be insightful, fun, and of huge value to aspiring, new and developing sales managers, but also one that experienced leaders would also benefit from. I certainly enjoyed it, I learned a lot, and we discussed a really wide range of issues, including motivating individuals, what to do when somebody is not performing, and the importance of building and nurturing your network. Enjoy. So Emma, thanks ever so much for finding the time, and I know you've got a crazy schedule, but finding the time to come on the podcast. We'll just start with a couple of standard questions, if you're okay with that, and then we'll see where that takes us.
Perfect.
So the first question is always, how did you get into sales leadership in the first place, and maybe why? What's the journey been for you?
It's always an interesting one, actually, and it takes me back many years, actually, to before I met you the first time when I was back in the UK, and I've now been 12 years in the US. But honestly, I've always had a passion for people, and I think rooted in all of that means that I always had a feeling that I wanted to sort of give back and look after others around me, and leadership felt like the best way to kind of be a platform to sort of grow from what I'd already been doing as an individual contributor. And so I always aspired to leadership. I didn't realize, in all honesty, I didn't realize until I actually got into it how hard that first step and that first management perspective is, because you suddenly go from being in control of your own self into actually having to think about typically span of control of 8 or so other people, think about them and what is best for them. And I will tell you, this is a longer answer than you planned, but I always say, right, the individual comes first. So it's all about you personally. If you don't look after yourself first, it's really hard to do the right things for the customer, the partner that you support, and also then last but not least is the company that you work for. Why? Because if you do the first two things, you'll naturally be there for the company that you work for. And I think that's really, really important as a leader. So that first leadership position was incredibly powerful coming into that first time.
Oh, okay. But you had a definite intent and aspiration, you said, to move into it. I kind of get that. And yeah, that transition, how long did it take you, do you think, to transition? Because I get, there is that transition gap, and it is difficult I remember for myself. Yeah. How long did it take you before you thought, now I know what management is about?
I don't think you know until the next role that you do, in all honesty, right? Because it's like any role that you do in progression. I think until you actually move to the next one, you realize how much you learned in that first leadership position. So when you leave an individual contributor position, you realize how much you knew in that vein. And then every sort of step along the way, I actually think, especially for a lot of diverse candidates as well, to be honest with you, it doesn't register until you start that next position and go, actually, okay, I know why I did that. I know kind of what challenges I'm about to face, and it kind of leads you on to the next thing that you want to drive to.
Yeah, so you become more conscious of it when you look back. Interesting, because I guess your first position, like all positions, it's you are busy. This is not something that people who just want a quiet life should move into.
Well, and do you know what? When I did my first position, it was actually when I was over in the UK, and honestly, it was around the time that I had my first child as well. So like there was this culmination of lots of things going on from a personal perspective as well as from a work perspective. And again, you don't realize until you look back, like, wow, what an incredible kind of set of achievements that was to do all these things together at once. There's an amazing book by a guy called Shazad Kamine, Chamine. It's called Positive Intelligence. I used it back in my first role when I was back in the UK, and I've used it ever since. And honestly, it talks about the amount of positivity you put into things is what you get out. It's true for individuals and it's true for teams. And so in that first position, if you can find something, whatever that is for you, that harnesses what you're bringing to the table to think differently about how that team's going to operate together, that's where the power comes together. And honestly, in there he talks about how we turn up, right? We judge ourselves, we judge the other person, and we judge the environment we're in within a few seconds of actually meeting someone, oftentimes negatively, unfortunately. And that means when you do that, you actually, your biases are coming into play, and actually you're making a judgment that might not be the right one further down the line. So like you being able to use other techniques from kind of other things like positive intelligence, etc., I think is a really powerful thing as a leader to bring something different to the table.
Excellent. Okay, I'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes for people who are listening and watching. So that I think gets to my next kind of standard question. So from your perspective, what are the 2 or 3 key attributes that people should focus on when they're promoting people? Actually, promoting I think is the wrong word, but moving people into sales management, or if I'm an aspiring sales manager myself, what are the characteristics I should be thinking about?
I think that's a really great question, actually. And the first thing I'll say is, like, not everybody's suitable to leadership, and that's absolutely perfectly okay, right? I often say that, ironically, when you're in control of your own kind of patch or whatever that sort of area looks like, you actually have much more control, right? It's you, it's a number, it's really simple. When you actually move into that first position in sales leadership, it's you and 8 or so people that actually everybody has got to be on their game and really driving the business forward. And that's not easy, right? So you know, the first challenge in leadership is a capability to be able to actually manage those individuals and kind of help them to be the best versions of themselves. So the characteristics I look for in leaders is, one, that they have some level of I call it grit, and by the way, there's another great one by Angela Duckworth. I actually I didn't realise until coming over here actually, and coming over to the US, and then looking at some of the connotations that she talks about in that book. And like some of the things that just set us apart fundamentally, that really make a difference. You're either born with that or not, basically, that passion to persevere, that determination to do. It's just as relevant whether you're an individual contributor or a leader. But like I'm looking for someone in a leadership position that really wants to do it because it's hard, as we've just said. Number 2 is that they have the propensity to really motivate, inspire, and lift up the team around them. I did actually I taught exercise to music, circuit training, aerobics, whatever you want to call it, for many years back in the UK. And one of the things they taught you there, and it was kind of fascinating when you think about leading a class into whatever you're going to do, they would always say, when you're stood at the front of the class, whatever you do, however you demonstrate that exercise routine element that you're going through, you need to be working at 110% of everybody in the class, because people will only, within your team, work to a percentage level of that. So, and it stuck with me because it's just as true in sales leadership today as it is in an environment of exercise. You should be out front. So if the characteristics I'm looking for in that leader is someone that's willing to go the extra mile, to do the things that are necessary, because I will tell you all the way through, it is the hardest first step to make into that first level leadership position. And all of the positions after that, you're building on some arsenal of knowledge to kind of grow and develop from there. So honestly, characteristics of grit, determination, and then really persevering through kind of what that first role, and through and supporting the team to do that as well.
Right. That's really interesting. It mirrors what I've got from some other leaders, but I think you put it into a really sharp focus there. When we started this Real Sales Manager project and looking to help people, I thought, it's going to be about how do you run a forecast meeting and how do you interview people. But actually, so much just comes down to these basic human characteristics. Yeah.
By the way, all of those things are critical too, Steve, without a doubt. But you can teach some of that. What you can't teach is the passion for that leadership position, the want to really kind of lift those around you up. That's something that you've got to just have in you, and you can hone management skills over time, but you've got to really want to be that first level leader.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, if that's not for you, much better to recognise that up front.
Absolutely.
Rather than
absolutely.
It'll destroy you if you.
Yes, very much so. And you're taking everybody's kind of challenges and problems with you. And often we all bring, especially today when we talk about mental health, etc., people bring their challenges to work. And, you're dealing with people's lives and livelihoods as you're kind of leading people through. So you've got to be conscious of that. It's a big responsibility.
Yes. And whether we like it or not, people are great. I mean, they're big boss watchers. Particularly your immediate manager, particularly in that first line role, it amazes me. Yes. So,
and can I just add, Steve, because I think this one's really important. People stay with a company because of the leaders that they work for. It's not just about the skills they need. It's such a powerful role that makes people want to kind of do better, do more, stick with a company, sell more, honestly, it couldn't be more important.
Yeah. I also heard a quote the other day that said, people never leave companies, they leave managers.
They really do.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it?
It really is.
And Emma, you talked about, the propensity to motivate people.
Yeah.
And you described, you have to be out front yourself. A lot of people call it modelling the way. But what do you actually do as a manager? You've got 8 or 9 people. How do you go about motivating them? For you, what's kind of worked for you?
So first and foremost, it's about the rigor that you set up, the cadence and the structure that you set up, right? So meeting with each of your individual team members every single week, I think is foundational. And a lot of leaders don't always do this, right? And that's probably the sharp contrast from coming from an individual contributor to a leader, is the new structures that you have in place. You have to think about, what am I going to leave behind? What am I not going to do anymore? And I genuinely believe we're in a different place these days than, you end up being a player coach out in the field. It's not about, I'm just not going to do any of those other things at all, but you've got to work out how you're going to let your team kind of grow and develop in the way that they need to, without micromanaging them, because I think that's the worst thing that you can do as a leader. And it's the quickest way to lose a team fundamentally. But, honestly, motivation is about meeting them regularly individually, dealing with their own needs and development on that one-to-one level. It's about meeting with them with a team, because you've always got a different kind of set of people within a team. And I always say there's no I in team deliberately. You're trying to work out what are the strengths of all of those individuals and how, when they come together, they're even better. It's why that positive intelligence by Shazad Kamin is so important for me, because I genuinely believe the stats out there that when you get that team environment working well together, it sort of delivers so much more as you move forward. But back to motivation, honestly, it's working out what makes people tick. A lot of companies do these different kind of assessments now. There's been many over time. By the way, that book also does an assessment on how you turn up. Are you a hyperachiever? Are you a people pleaser? Are you a control freak in the way? And it's not that those aren't the term. The last one isn't the term, but it's the term I use, because you need to know how those individuals turn up, because then that actually leads to the communication style that they have with each other and with yourself as well. And then like often actually in my first leadership positions, I would find something that was not necessarily just within the work environment, but something outside as well. Do you want to do some level of challenge together? Are you going to find some way of, some give back topic that is really important to all of you on the team, that you can come and get together as a collective, even if it's virtually these days, by the way, and you can find a way to deliver together on things that are kind of simpler and easier to kind of demonstrate how you are really coming together. And then I believe there's nothing better in motivation in really thinking about, like, how do you create some of that competition naturally as well? Clearly, you're going to do that from a forecasting perspective. You're going to do that from a metric management perspective of the things that you're going. Yeah. But you know what? The individuals on a team, or like, it doesn't matter whether you're a leader of leaders as you go up the chain, if you don't set the bar and set the clear definition of what you're looking for and what good looks like, how can you expect anyone to really deliver on the things that you're expecting them to deliver on? It's not fair. Yeah. So clear accountability in the first place, clear set of objectives that you want the team to go after. The numbers are given. The softer skills are far harder to work on, and the interaction between folks far harder. So motivation comes from how you turn up and lead yourself, and then how you bring the team together in a team environment, but how you kind of work on their own individual skill sets as well. And then a little bit of competition to go with it.
Right. Okay. But you obviously, go along with the concept that we don't treat everybody the same. No. Equal opportunity, obviously.
Yes.
But, it's different. I mean, they used to say different strokes for different folks. But, it's very much individual. Yeah. I get exactly what you're talking about. For you, particularly given your approach, what do you do when people aren't responding to that? Because you clearly set high standards. You expect a lot of your people, and again, I think most, particularly salespeople, will rise to that, but some won't. How do you deal with that as a manager?
Do you know what? That is the hardest piece of that first line leadership position and any leadership position after that, but it's the most important. It's the one that we often get wrong going in for the first time, because we think, no, we'll find a way round. We'll get that individual to kind of get to the place they need to be. And we give them more time. And like this sounds kind of negative in some respects as well, but I mean it in the most positive way. Like taking action quickly. The first thing is clear feedback. Like feedback is a gift. And it doesn't have to be, well, you're rubbish, aren't you? Or you really don't know what you're... Like, honestly, like, there's a better way to do it. Look, I think how you turned up on that presentation, you were clearly nervous. You need to think about kind of how you practice going into that. Like, there's positive coaching moments that you can do all through scenarios where you go watch your team in an environment with the customer and internal meetings. And that feedback, that gift that you give to those individuals is hugely powerful. Now, we have to remember when we give feedback, most people, and I'm just the same, by the way, I only hear the negative. So you've got to kind of balance what you do in terms of giving both the negative, and it's not really negative, it's positive coaching environments to help them develop, as well as the things that they're, really good at. So balance it out, and overbalance sometimes, but you've got to make sure they hear the things that you want them to do better on, because some people flower it and I probably did this early on in my career as well. And then you get to a place where it's like, well, did they really hear what you've said? And I will tell you, I think one of the most powerful skill sets any sales individual, any sales leader can have is listening. And it's one of the most underrated things that we do, because we are waiting for a gap in the conversation often to wait for the opportunity to say the thing that we wanted to say, instead of actively listening and being able to respond to what is being laid down in a given meeting. So that is really powerful as well.
Yeah, but presumably, I mean, it's a skill that you have to develop over time. It's not just something you can fix.
It's not. 2 ears and one mouth, right?
I mean, I'm ancient, but and I learned that at the start of my career. But it's still so relevant. So relevant. But I mean, for salespeople and for sales managers.
Yeah.
Okay, so I love that phrase. Feedback is a gift. I will pinch that. Thank you. But again, so yeah, take action early. But yeah, you said, we all only hear the negatives. I think that's a trait of a high achiever, because we're always trying to improve.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But how do you deal with the people who are just, know, I'm here to earn some money. These are my hours. Yeah, and they just don't respond.
Honestly, I think typically when you come into a new team, you have a range of capabilities. You've got your hyperachievers that are always going to want to be knowing what else can they do, where else can they go. They're super driven, right? Those are the people. Sometimes they can be really difficult, by the way, as well, because they are such hyperachievers that you have to balance that out. But foundationally, you want more of those individuals. You've got the people in the middle that you want to keep trying to move up the chain to kind of be even better. And then you've got people that really actually need some positive coaching. Some of them will make it. They'll make it into the middle, and others won't. And what you're looking for is those that are disruptive in a team as well, because I will tell you, a negative culture is way worse than actually just when you're looking at the numbers and the metrics. And if you've got a caustic personality that is, I had this once when I came into a position. Well, we've tried that before and it didn't work. And I'm like, well, we may have done, but this is a different point in time. And, we have to look at all ways for us to kind of move this business forward. And because it didn't work before does not mean it's not going to work again in the future. So you try and bring them along. You try and positively coach, but ultimately, at the end of the day, you may have to make a negative decision to move on. And again, I believe making those decisions is the right thing to do, because it's the right thing for the rest of your team. If you let one individual get away with behavior that is not conducive to a positive team environment, then what ends up happening is other people think they can get away with that as well, and that's not helpful. You want people looking at the best in class, the best driven, kind of capable, results-orientated individuals that can make a difference. Some are quieter than others, by the way. That's perfectly okay. But they bring the average up, and you're trying to kind of get everyone to that position, sort of motivated and focused on the future.
So an interesting debate I've had with a number of leaders is, if we use your terminology, you've got your high achievers, the A players. You've got I call them the performers. They do a good job, and you try and just increment them every year. And then you've got your problem people, who some of them will move up. Some we have to do other things with. As a manager, for you, where do you spend your time? Is it trying to fix that bottom 10, 20%? Or is it, working with the top people who, if you can increase, their output by another 10%, that's going to have a huge impact on your results? Where do you put your focus, Emma?
That's a really powerful question, and honestly, it used to be the case. People said, "Well, let's get the lowest common denominator raised." That's not the case anymore. You focus on the top and the middle, because those are the place where you can make the biggest difference, right? Especially the middle, by the way, because they have the propensity to kind of improve up through the stack. The lower achievers, look, you coach, but never over-rotate on the amount of time that you're spending with them. Some of them genuinely are in the wrong role. It's the wrong company for them. There's just something that's not gelling. And honestly, trying to work that out quickly is really, really important as you kind of identify what next. And then making a decision that maybe it is time to part ways with certain individuals as well. Making that decision quickly enough, honestly, is really quite powerful. But you definitely spend the time on the middle and the top.
Yeah. So I would totally go along with that. I mean, I know I made mistakes where I saw some of the poor performers as a challenge.
Yes.
Surely I can get them. And it's that's not the right thing to do. And I've also found that it's those poor performers who are in the wrong role, maybe just the wrong company. It's actually kind for them, because they know in their heart of hearts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you can give them enough time, right, as well, to kind of work through that. Obviously, every country in the world is different in terms of rules and regulations and so on around employment. But I think you both know, the leader and the individual, whether or not that's the right person, the right culture, etc. And it's trying to move that through as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. Really interesting. Can we just move on a little bit? Because the other thing that, we worked together a long time ago, but what always struck me was you were really strong at building relationships, clearly, with your team of 8 people or whatever, where you've got time, you're seeing them every week, but you seem to have this knack of building quite deep relationships far and wide. So what's the secret of that, Emma?
I don't
do
know
you
if
still
there's
do
a
that,
secret.
do you think?
Honestly, a couple of things. One, I think your network is foundational. Actually, one of my great mentors, and I've had quite a few over time, by the way, said to me, people do business with people they like. And honestly, the harder you make it, the more difficult it's going to be to close that down. So remembering that is really powerful, because it is so true, right? People want to be around people they like. People if you've ever walked in a room and someone is being hugely negative, whether it's virtually or in person, and it kind of sucks the energy out of the room, right? When you walk into a room and you feel the energy, again, back to that positive intelligence, that kind of how much of the time are you turning up in a positive way? Because I believe energy breeds energy, it breeds success. And genuinely, you can give your energy to people as you kind of are out in the work environment, etc. And that feeds them to give their best in what they do. So remembering people buy from who they like, right? And so how you turn up counts in multiple different ways, right? Turning up in a positive, energetic way. Not a cheerleader way. I hate that term in many respects. I actually learned that over here, actually, where people are over the top, kind of cheering from the sidelines, but in a motivational way, is really, really powerful. And so remembering all of that as well, and thinking about really making sure that you bring people along with you. One of sort of the great pieces of advice I had sort of over time was, look, a great leader has an ability when they go into battle, if we kind of bring it back to kind of that sort of scenario, they are first over the hill, but they bring their team with them. And so don't expect anybody to do anything you're not willing to do, because you should not do that. But then demonstrate and show them the way. And then if you create that culture that people want to be part of something, they're going to be with you to the end. And honestly, I will tell you, the journey is just as important as the end result as well. People forget that sometimes, and it's no, we're gung-ho, we're out for the end game. But actually making sure you make the right steps along that journey is just as critical in motivating a team and thinking about how you move forward. But go back to network a minute. The network that you have and you build is super critical. Thinking about the role that you've got and also the role that you want next, and planning for the people that you need to work with, the environment that you want to be in, even the company that you want to move to, and also the set of knowledge and training and enablement that you need to do to get there is really something that you should be doing on an ongoing basis. And I will tell you, a lot of people don't plan their careers, and I would argue for myself, I don't know that I did enough of that in the early days, but that focus of doing that and building that network is so critical, both for who you sell to, who you work with, and the environment you're in, and finding the next thing.
Right. Okay. So I think you've answered my kind of next question, which is your network is it's with your customer base and the market, and it's internal, but it's that whole, the ecosystem, as they say.
It is.
But it's spreading your tentacles everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, I get that. But how do you make it so you have personal connections with probably I don't know, thousands of people? How do you do that? Because some of us, we go on LinkedIn and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Or we have very personal relationships with a small group of people. But you seem to have, warm personal relationships with lots of people.
Well, I'd like to think so, but I honestly, first of all, I stand out a little bit, so people tend to remember you when you walk in a room or you suddenly turn up again. But you gotta spend time on it, and that's why I say that the importance of thinking about the next set of people that kind of will one that you can help, because you always need to think about, whenever you're thinking about mentoring and sponsorship, who could what can you give back to those individuals, as well as those that can help you in it might just be a knowledge base development to learn whether that's a role that you even want to do in the future or not, but then keeping connected to these people as you move forward, because I genuinely believe most of the time, you get a job for people that you know, not because of what you necessarily know. And that sounds terrible, because surely it should be on what you know. But there's a lot to be said about people trusting, and it takes a long time to build up that trust. So working on that, I think is pretty important, and trying to look. It's hard for me because I've spent time all over the world now, 12 years over here in the US as well, and so you're trying to make connection points in lots of different places still, and I try and keep in touch. I'm not sure that I still do the greatest job that I could do, but you do your best basically to kind of be very visible there.
You talk there about trust. So there's a lot of people at the moment saying that, the whole business of how we go about selling stuff, in complex business is changing. It's much more transactional. Customers are more educated. They don't want to talk to us. A lot more transparency. On the other hand, what I see is, because there's so much information, people just are overwhelmed. So they go back to the people they trust. Is that now? You must be in the middle of that, particularly in your current role. What's your take on all that?
It's kind of interesting. I do think it depends which bit of the market you're in, right? I have teams that work across the Fed and SLED space globally. I've got teams that work across the biggest enterprise accounts. I've got teams that run down through commercial and into small and mid, right? And each of those can be a little bit different, right? I do genuinely believe customers are super smart, right? So never underestimate where they are. For the bigger customers and the Fed and SLED, I do think it's a lot about trust and relationships. Where you see people have had years and years of experience with that given customer, that customer really trusts them. Doesn't mean that as a company you should not be looking at the value that you can add in, and what you're doing to develop your product, solutions, software support, etc. Because you should, but that relationship counts for an awful lot. However, a lot of companies have had a lot of turnover recently as well. So invariably you're bringing new blood into the organization as well. And by the way, I love that. There's nothing better to kind of sprinkle new knowledge coming into the workplace, as well as kind of that more experience, and sprinkling a bit of that magic dust across both of those, because it brings different perspectives. And you need the knowledge that is history and length of time, but you also want the energy and the new ideas and focus that new knowledge brings with you as well there. So thinking about that is really important. I would tell you, we do a lot of work around what is the training and enablement that we need for each of our teams, especially as you go through the chain of leadership as well. I'm a big believer that one of my foundational principles for any of my teams is to be the best they can be. And you only do that by constant learning and development. And by the way, that doesn't necessarily mean just learning in the sales environment of what is my approach? Am I going to use Medpic? How am I using Salesforce? What am I doing with, all the different tools out there, Clary, Salesloft, Gong, you name it, basically, all the different things, outreach, etc. You can use all of those things and train people on that. But understanding how to come to a customer about the problem that they're trying to solve, not with a product approach or a software approach or a service approach, coming and actually listening to where they're at and looking at their results, looking at the focus as a company, what they're trying to achieve, and then trying to find that connection point that joins you to that individual that you're working with, I still think is pretty powerful. Like finding that thing that makes them tick and that might resonate with you, and you have some background in whatever that is, is also important in the mix of there as well. And look, there's all sorts of people out there. Meeting people where they're at is really, really powerful.
Okay, yeah. And for you, is the physical meeting still important? Where are you on that debate?
It's interesting, actually. We do a lot of things remotely now, without a doubt, and I do genuinely believe there's something different about a physical face-to-face with a customer. Like if you want to create a deep relationship, it's hard to do it over video, right? Like first and foremost, it's a totally different medium, and that's why it's almost like we've all got to overemphasize how we turn up on video, because it always comes up with a fraction less than what the energy level that we might actually be exhibiting, because you can't see all the kind of moves and how people are kind of interacting in that space in its entirety. It's better than voice only, but I still think there's a powerful place for a meeting face to face, and it can cement a relationship by doing that. But not always possible. But definitely, I think we lost a lot in COVID with people not being able to meet face to face. And that doesn't matter what walk of life you're in, whether you're at school all the way up through the workplace, whether an individual contributor or a leader. You lost that interconnection, and it's so important.
Yeah, it's still a debate that's going on. I think it's different maybe in different parts of the world and different markets, but I get that as well. I'm going to ask to kind of summarize this main section. We've covered a huge amount. Before we do that, you talked about energy, and Emma, you just come across with so much energy. It's coming. How do you keep that for yourself? I mean, you haven't spent all morning, thinking about doing this podcast and revving yourself up for it. You just exude energy. How do you do that?
Honestly, it starts with, and I said, right, it starts with you and you looking after yourself first. I genuinely believe you can't turn up in your best as an individual contributor. You can't turn up as your best as a leader or a leader of leaders without looking after yourself fundamentally first. And that means you need to work out what's right for you. For me, it's the gym or a run every morning. It doesn't matter whether it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes or sometimes just 10, because that's all you've got time for. But just creating a routine. Another great book, by the way, The Power of Habit. It talks about cue, routine, reward, and it's like what sort of starts you off on that process that you're going to run through, the routine that you go through to then get the reward out of it. So that's a powerful thing to learn, to get into a habit for your own personal health and happiness, basically, because how you turn up counts. I've always believed that. And like I say, it comes back to you've got to find the things that motivate you in what you're doing. And ultimately, I believe as a leader, motivate the people around you, because they're the people that count. Like what you do is only as powerful as that message that goes all the way down through the chain that you're trying to drive as you move forward fundamentally.
Right. Okay. That is amazing. Okay. So what would be your top 3 tips for somebody just about to start into a sales management role, their first sales management role, in complex business to business?
Yeah, it's another interesting question, and I don't know if it comes in 3s. One would be looking after yourself as you think about what you do going forward. So finding the things in the leadership, because it's the hardest role that you'll ever do, that first leadership position, finding the things that keep you sane, whatever that is, right? Mind, body and soul, it's your thing, you find it. That is going to be critical. Number 2 is always about the people within the team, right? What are you going to do to motivate, inspire, metric manage and drive, right? It's all of those things together. Those individuals on your team to be the best that they possibly can be. That is really critical in terms of that first and every other leadership position, honestly, from there. And then thirdly, you are good enough to be there. Don't let the imposter syndrome tell you that, because often you've been you've played for that position against other people that are on the team as well, and that's a really hard thing to do. Why is it you over those individuals that could have been there? Own it, be real with it, and enjoy it, because it's too easy to work so hard and forget that we're doing it for a reason, whatever that is for each of us personally. Home, relationships, the dog, the cat, whatever they are, mine are in the background here. You're doing it for that, and remembering that so you can balance that. See, talk of the dog walks behind me there now, but you remember why you're there, and keep that balance right in terms of what you do. Probably not what you're expecting to hear, but I'm always a little bit different, I will tell you.
No, not, but so powerful, and that looking after yourself, because I think it is. And I was probably guilty of this, my very first sales management job. You throw yourself into it. You're trying to do so much, and you forget. And it's easy to, work 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day, and you don't look after yourself, you don't look after your relationships, and that'll come to bite you.
Exactly.
And it's not what life is about.
It's not. You're there for a reason. And look, that doesn't mean to say you can't give it your all while you're there, but you can't be your best. You can't turn up as your best for your team if you're not doing that first and foremost. Yeah,
and then they're not going to be their best.
Yes.
Excellent. Emma, let's take a quick break, and then I've got 2 final questions for you.
Cool.
Bonus question.
Emma, thanks for all that. Finally, we all learn from our mistakes. We hope new sales managers can learn from our mistakes. So, are you happy to share with us what was your biggest mistake that you've made as a manager, as a leader, and what you learned from it?
Honestly, it's really simply not moving fast enough. And I know that sounds terrible, and I mean not moving fast enough on your poor performers, because it damages culture, it distracts the team, it actually leads people to leave a team when you actually aren't managing people in the right way, both for performance, because as long as you've been clear what that performance is, and also culture and how they turn up. So honestly, my biggest mistake was not moving early enough in the first role that I had as a leader, and subsequently from there. And honestly, maybe I actually am the other way now. I move too fast in terms of what you do. But I genuinely believe that leadership position, you're only as good as your team. And therefore, you need your team to be the best that they possibly can be. And you always have that range of capabilities like we talked about before. But making decisions quickly, because it's not just fair for the team, it's fair for the individual. Remember, I said feedback is a gift. So you've worked with them, then make a decision and move on, because it actually will allow you to progress quicker as a team, allow the individuals on your team to progress quicker as well.
And why is it that so many of us don't move quickly enough? Is it just confidence, or?
I think it's genuinely look, we're all human beings, and we often look quickly onto, well, they have a family and they have an environment at home that they're trying to support. They've got problems to deal with. You have to be laser focused as a leader on the things that you're driving for the business. The more leeway you give, the more opportunity to digress from the direction you're trying to go to. So you cannot give that up. Be clear about the direction, be clear about the expectations, and the best can come from that. And honestly, I've found that people respond much, much better when they know where they are. And it motivates others as well when you as a leader are prepared to make the hard decisions. But people don't do it because they care. They're nice. I totally get it. I'm not suggesting in any shape or form that you shouldn't be true to yourself. You shouldn't do it in a kind and graceful way. You absolutely should. But you have to make those decisions quickly and move on, because it's right for everybody in that chain fundamentally.
Very good. I think that's great advice. On a more uplifting note, what's been your biggest triumph, and what have you learned from it? When you look back, you've got a lot of your career in front of you, but looking back, what's been the highlight so far?
Honestly, I often tell, like, especially our grads when they come into, I've had a lot of programs that we've run. We're just about to start one now as well around bringing graduates in and early in career folks into the team, and you build, you train, you motivate, and you move on. And I often say to them, look, in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years, I want you to come back to me and tell me how that first position helped you to get to where you need to go. And honestly, watching some of my team move on and move up through the chain and become the best versions of themselves and keep going with that, by the way, is the biggest reward as a leader to watch that happening. And I'm not going to give individuals, but I've seen so many people that over time that have kind of moved on and done that from my teams. You know who you are out there. And I'm so proud of that, because I hope in some small way that I could have helped them to get there. But it's all about what they did, right? And owning that for themselves. I'm just super proud to watch that as I watch people move on. And I genuinely believe, whilst I talked about the people that kind of you need to make the decision on moving on, there's plenty that you can move around an organization, that move on to a new role and are super inspired and like get so much more energy as they go to that next position. That's pretty powerful too, by the way. Like people finding their home and finding what really works for them as they move forward, and for the companies that they work for too. So that's super powerful for me.
Okay, and that kind of brings us back to the start, because as a manager, if you don't get a real kick out of seeing people progress, you probably shouldn't be in the job.
No,
That's brilliant. So Emma, listen, once again, thank you ever so much. So many words of wisdom. I'm sure lots of aspiring and new and developing managers are going to get a huge amount from this. Any final words of wisdom?
Just like you're probably better than you think you are, basically, out there. Like, don't go with arrogance. That's never a good thing. But like, own the things that you've done, and don't be afraid to kind of share those in the right way as you sort of work across your network, because your network will be so important to find that next position. And I would say just keep stretching yourself. It's too easy to get in your comfort zone, and then you never push yourself out of. I sometimes think, if I'd have moved quicker and earlier, would that have helped me get further than I have today? I've done pretty well. I feel very proud of where I've got to at this point. But just make sure you're being disruptive to yourself, and pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone for what you can truly be, because you can be the best that you can be by taking on new challenges and stretching yourself. And so you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone to do that.
I love that. Be disruptive to yourself. This is turning out to be quite philosophical about it's about meaning of life for us all. It's not just how do I do this job a bit better, but you can get tremendous fulfillment from it. And it seems like you're doing that, Emma, which is brilliant to see. Okay. Excellent. Thank you ever so much.
Lovely to see you again.
And you, Emma. Thank you. If you're an aspiring, new or developing sales manager in complex business to business, or if you know someone who is, you may want to go to www.realsalesmanager.com. That's www.realsalesmanager, all one word, .com, to learn about our unique blend of training and coaching to help aspiring sales managers to decide if it's right for them and how to go about getting a job, to help new sales managers get as effective as possible, as quickly as possible, and to help developing sales managers with a personalised program to improve specific skills.